This episode is brought to you by Thorne, the industry leader in nutritional solutions. Now, Thorne is actually trusted by 8 US national teams and championship teams in the NFL, NBA, and Major League, as well as recently becoming the official sports performance nutrition partner of the UFC. So when it comes to supplements, the tactical athlete space and the athletic space need two things. We need efficacy, meaning the products do what they say they're going to do on the label, and then we need to trust the fact that we are not going to fail either athletic drug tests or work-related drug tests. Now, Thorne has actually been around since the 1980s, where they were used by physicians and hospitals for nutritional supplements for the patients. They were so successful that athletic teams and even special operations teams reached out to them and they started supplying them as well. Very recently, they actually opened their doors to the general public. Now, what sets Thorne apart is they manufacture their own products in a state-of-the-art NSF-certified facility in South Carolina. They use only the purest possible ingredients formulated with no stearates or arbitrary fillers in the cleanest manufacturing process. Most of you listening come from a profession where it can take its toll physically and mentally, and many of us are not able to bolster our nutrition purely with the food that we eat. And that's where supplementation comes in. So if you're ready to maximize your health and performance, visit thorne.com, thorne.com. Take a short product quiz to be paired up with the perfect health and fitness supplements. And for you, the audience, if you use the code BTS10, behind the shield 10, BTS10, you will get 10% off your first order. And if you want to learn even more about Thorne, go to episode 323 of Behind the Shield podcast, and you will hear my interview with Wes Barnett and Joel Totoro from Thorne. This episode is sponsored by 511, a company that I've used for well over a decade and continue to use to this day. And 511 is offering you guys, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a discount on every purchase you make with them. Before we get to that code, I want to highlight a couple of products that, again, I personally use today. One of the most impressive products they just released is their Rush Backpack 2.0. Now, for many of you, whether you're going to the fire station, the police station, whether you're traveling with your family, whether you're taking training courses, we have to fly, we have to drive, we have to take trains. And I have to say, I own multiple backpacks, many of 511's different ones, but as far as a day pack, this one was the most impressive. There are so many different compartments. The way it sits on your back is incredibly comfortable. If you are a concealed carry person, there's also a spot for a weapon. So they've thought of multiple things that a man or woman would have to do on a daily basis. That is in addition to all of the products that I talk about a lot. Their uniforms, fit for men or fit for women in the first responder professions. The footwear that they offer, whether it's the Norris sneaker or the Atlas system that is designed for foot health and therefore knees and back and hips and shoulders and neck. As a civilian, I live in a lot of their clothes as well. Their jeans stretch. You can actually squat down in them. We live in Florida here, so I wear a lot of their shorts, which again, very, very lightweight material. You can get it wet and it will dry almost immediately. And then moving to the fitness and tactical space, I used to have just a regular weight vest. Recently, I switched to a 511 vest and actually bought ballistic plates as well. My thinking was simply, if I'm going to have a vest, why not have one that protects me as well? And that tac vest is trusted by law enforcement all around the country. So I mentioned they were going to offer you a discount code. So if you go to 511tactical.com and enter the code SHIELD15, SHIELD15, you will get 15% off not just that one purchase, but every time you visit their store. And if you want to learn more about 511, their mission, their products, then listen to episode 338 of the Behind the Shield podcast with the CEO and founder, Francisco Morales. Welcome to episode 599 of Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name is James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show Danny O'Connor. Now, Danny is one of the founding members of House of Pain, and I'm sure many of you are aware of their music. However, his life story is so much more powerful than the music alone. So we discuss a host of topics from his early life, finding his way into hip-hop, addiction, recovery, The Outsiders, and so much more. Before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment, go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for other people to find. And this is a free library of almost 600 episodes. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Danny Boy O'Connor. Enjoy. Well, Danny, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
My pleasure, man.
So, very first question, where on planet Earth are we finding you on this fine day?
I'm in beautiful downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma, home of the greaser, and I'm loving every minute of it. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, raised in Los Angeles. I spent probably 48 years of my life in either the San Fernando Valley or Hollywood area. And I moved to Tulsa 5 years ago, and it's the smartest thing I've ever done. So happy to be joining you.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I know there's a hell of a story, and there's a very powerful story of why you're in Tulsa, so I'd love to get that as we progress through. I'd love to start chronologically at the very beginning, though. So tell me where you were born, and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, and how many siblings.
Yeah, so to my knowledge at the time, I was born in Brooklyn, New York. At 2 months old, we were evicted from our apartment. My father went to prison, and we moved in with my grandparents who lived in Staten Island over the bridge from Brooklyn. I spent the first 3 years with my grandparents, and then my mother got married to another alcoholic. We moved maybe a mile and a half down the road to a projects called the Tyson Lane Projects. And it was, it was tough. It was, when I lived with my grandparents, it was fantastic because, grandparents always kind of, if they've had any flaws in their own raising of their children, they kind of figure a way to make up for it on the grandchildren. So they took very good care of me, and I loved every minute of being there. I did not love every minute of being in the projects. It was tough back then. New York in the 70s and the early 70s was a rough place. A lot of people coming home from Vietnam, a lot of people's parents, there was a lot of, I remember as a kid seeing, just people in the laundromat. Every building had like a laundry room, and people were in there getting robbed. They were waiting for women to come in with their money for the laundry money and rob them for that. I think people were getting pushed off the roof of the 6-story building that we lived in. And a lot of tough kids, a lot of Puerto Rican kids, a lot of tough Irish kids, a lot of tough Italian kids. And it just was completely different than, being just the golden child at my grandparents' house a couple of miles away, So, but it was all I knew. And, I have 2 siblings. I did not know I had an older brother until I was about 20 years old, which we'll get to. I guess I'll tell you how that happened as we move forward. But at the time, I only knew that I had a stepsister through my stepfather. And then we stayed in New York till I was 6 years old, and we moved to California. My mother was a key punch operator at the Chase Manhattan Bank. So the first few years of my life, I didn't really look at her or understand that was my mother, because she worked nights and slept in the days. And obviously as an infant, I was up in the days and slept at night. So I would really only see her barely on the weekends. And for people who don't know, key punch operating it predates computer programming. It is technically computer. Maybe not programming, but they used to have index cards, and then on those index cards there was divots punched out, square or rectangular divots, and you would insert those into the computer, and it would then, by the placement of those digits, those holes punch, it would know whatever you were trying to tell it to do. So late nights at Chase Manhattan Bank, that's what she was doing. She left for LA because her brother was also a computer programmer, and Los Angeles at the time was the hotbed for all of that activity. She ended up in the aerospace portion of it. It's at Lytton, and she worked on the guidance systems for our nuclear arsenal, or the defense systems against Russians, the Russian nuclear arsenal. That Star Wars program. I don't know if you remember that, but there was Reagan Star Wars programs. So so she wrote in a language that's no longer used anymore. Ironically, during Y2K, they brought her back for like triple the pay that she was making at any other time to try to fix the Y2K, because the language that they wrote was called Cobalt, and it's just not a computer language anymore. So anybody who knew it would be, of a certain age, and they were trying to fix the Y2K clock problem. But as we know, that wasn't as big as a problem as we thought it was. And, I share this often because I'm in recovery, and, my grandparents' life was great. When I moved in the apartment with my mother and my stepfather, he was drunk a lot. He was violent. But it was kind of all around me in the projects. And I just thought, okay, this is the next part of life where it's tough and it's uncomfortable and it's scary. And, there was a lot of that around me at the time. And so when we moved to California when I was 6, unfortunately for my stepfather, he dies pretty soon after that. He died at 35 of cirrhosis of the liver. So I can't imagine, and this is coming from a recovered alcoholic addict, the kind of drinking you'd have to do to die at 35. But I saw some of the drinking as a kid. I remember my mother, he would walk me to school in the morning, and then he would stop at the liquor store. He would come out with a pint of milk and a bottle, and then he would come up close to me and said, don't tell your mother I'm drinking milk. I said, all right, yeah, no. I said, remember, don't tell her I was drinking milk. And as like a 5-year-old kid, that's like such a weird request, All right, I won't tell her. And then what he would do is pour his fifth of whatever he was drinking into that milk carton with the milk, and then drink it, throw it up, drink it, throw it up. And by the third or fourth time, he would drink it and it would go down, and then he could get right. He was a real alcoholic, and he could stop shaking and he could get well. And that's what he did to get well. And then when I would come home from school, my mother, the first thing she would ask me was Richie drinking milk? And I'm like, I didn't know what to do, because I was scared of him. And I was scared, and I didn't know what to tell her. I don't even remember if I told on him or if I did. It was always awkward. I think I probably cried, and then she couldn't get an answer out of me because it was just scary times. And looking back, obviously, like I said, I described what I now know was a full-blown alcoholic who was every day had to try to get a few drinks just to sit down in there to get him to be able to be semi-functional, which is such a tough way of living. And it's unfortunate that he didn't find recovery, but it's scary when you're a kid. And I brought it up to my mother once. She started crying about it. I'm like, that it just, as an adult now, I can't imagine putting kids in the care of that, in the hands of that. But again, I got to have some empathy for my mother too. She was probably 23, 24, late 20s at best. And I think to myself when I was late 20s, which I felt, those are not some of my finer moments in those at that age. And the decisions I made were based off of, fear or selfish, things that I was trying to do. And so I have empathy, but, there's part of me that's, I thought maybe I'd be a parent by this point. I'm not a parent at this point. But if I was a parent at this point, I would definitely have all of the necessary life lessons, and just all the instruction would be simple. Just do the exact opposite of what my parents did. And that would be a pretty good roadmap for success. So anyway, I think it made me who I am. It made me, tough where I needed to be tough. Sometimes that muscle was overworked, and later in life, recovery and sobriety and some humility would soften me up a bit. And I feel like at this point, I found what I was looking for in that area. But yeah, it was a tough life. So when we finally get to California, it was culture shock. I was stuck in military school for a year, which was overwhelming. The curriculum at third grade was so high that I wasn't even ready for it. I got held back that year. I went to public school the next year and was a straight A student just for that maybe the first semester because the curriculum prior to that was so hard, and they would give you SWATs if you got demerits and stuff like that. They would literally every Friday they'd pull all the kids in that didn't shine their shoes or didn't have the uniform straight or weren't turning in homework, and they would literally give you the paddle. Wow. And it's scary too when you're a third grade kid, so by the time I got to public school, it was a lot more easier on me, but I was never a good student. I feel there's definitely a learning disability that I have. I'd always be the class clown or try to get people to laugh or always do things for approval. I feel like I never got the approval I was looking for at home. And so I look for that in other situations. And maybe that's still true of me. I don't know if that ever changes. I know it's a driving force. In a lot of the endeavors that I took on, it was always something in a public light or something that people would be like, wow, that's cool, then would be to do behind closed doors and nobody ever know. But that on the same, and I'm thinking out loud, I'm spitballing here, but I think the things that happen behind closed doors are people that are, the aptitude is more fit for that. I'm more in front of the camera, if you will, than behind the camera, So, but so life was, life for me, I don't want to sing a tale of woe. My mother did the best she could. We were never poor. We were always middle class, sometimes lower middle class, sometimes just middle class. There was always kids that were poor. There were friends that I had that were way poorer than me, and there were friends that we had in California that were way richer than me. I think when we moved to California, after being there, after I started to, my early teens, I started to realize that everybody had like a different, some people were rich, some people were poor, some people, the pack starts to separate, some people's bicycles were better, some people's clothes were better, the handheld like little Pac-Man things started coming out, or, the Nintendo systems or whatever. And some people's family could afford them with not a problem. And some had to wait a year or two before they could, the prices came down and got them. And it's at that point where I started to feel a little uncomfortable, selfish, aware of that, and then feeling less than. And it's right about that time that I see The Outsiders. I always credit that movie with kind of like affirming that if the best life ever gets is a pack of friends that have your best interest and you theirs, a few denim jackets, a pack of cigarettes, and we sneak into the drive-in theater, that if that's the best life gets, that I could live with that. You know what I mean? And so I carried that for a long time, with me, that vibe, that Dallas Winston, Matt Dillon character vibe, just, get tough on one side and nothing can touch you. And then having the empathy that Johnny Cade had in The Outsiders, if you know the book or movie. But, and then the only thing I think I'm skipping over, which was a tremendous gift that at the time I didn't realize how important a role it would play in my life. But that stepfather that I had, he had a wonderful brother, my Uncle Mickey, and his wife, my Aunt Edie, and two kids at the time. They had another kid later. And they would take me every summer. I would fly out to New Jersey to meet them. They were from Staten Island or Brooklyn originally, then Staten Island, then New Jersey. And I would fly out every summer to meet them because my mother just couldn't handle two kids and she would be at work all the time. And she would fly me out there, and then we would drive in the station wagon from New Jersey all the way to Springfield, Missouri, which is literally like the center of the U.S. And my aunt came from a farm. And along the way, they would stop at like thrift stores, antique shops, flea markets. They were in search of coffee grinders. They were in the coffee business. They were looking for antique coffee grinders. But as kids, we were looking for comic books and baseball cards and fatigues and patches from the military. Would be, these were exciting trips for us. And I think it made me roadworthy from a young age. And I was always fascinated with just life on the road. And I'd get to a different hotel in a different city, in a different town, and we turn on the TV and the commercials were different. And some of the products were different. In LA, we didn't have Mellow Yellow, which was a soda you could find in the Midwest. We didn't have Entenmann's and Devil Dogs that they had in New York, but they didn't have them. And then vice versa, we had some stuff in LA that they didn't have. And I just realized like this, I was comfortable in the constant motion and traveling thing. I was a sponge for all of that stuff. And I think by the time I got into the music business, there were some people that were in other groups that are contemporaries, and some of those guys kind of pulled out of touring for a long time because they just hated being on the road. But that was never my story. So I look back at those those years as like kind of the thing that saves me, you know, because and also by going back and forth every summer till I was about 13 or so. This is pre-internet, pre-cell phones. Obviously, I'm 53 years old, so this is in the 80s, early 80s. Music and television and movie influences are different, man. And I always say I was bringing Oingo Boingo and Fishbone tapes back to New Jersey with me, and I was coming home with Curtis Blow, Run DMC, and Grandmaster Flash. And at the time, there were big differences. You know, there was skateboard and surf culture in LA, and I was dressing like every other kid, which was OP, Vans, and Lightning Bolt. And then coming back from that summer with maybe a pair of Pumas and some Lee denim, just trying to emulate that New York hip hop look, and spending a lot of my time, you know, listening to radio that we could get in New Jersey that was playing a little bit of R&B and hip hop at the time, and it made me kind of like a wizard on both coasts amongst the 12-year-olds, if you will, because I knew a lot about stuff that they wouldn't hear about until a couple of years later or on a movie soundtrack or whatever. So it just kind of, I felt like I was at the epicenter of both of that new wave / hip hop era as it was starting. And I always felt a kinship to hip hop because in my heart, I'm a New Yorker till I die, even though I spent a vast majority of my life in Los Angeles. I've always been a fan of the Yankees. I've always been in love with anything that's been like 70s or 80s New York, or even before that, but that era in particular. And then going back every summer, New York, New Jersey area, I just would soak up as much as I could that summer and carry that with me until the following summer. And then, you know, by the time I'm 20, we're signed to a New York label and we're going back and forth coast to coast. But it was, like I like to call it, a poor man's Glenn E. Friedman experience. And if you don't know who that is at home, Google that name, you'll be shocked. It's one of the most prolific photographers to ever do it. And he definitely covered, at 14, he was covering the Dogtown skateboard scene in its infancy here in California. He covered the DC punk scene. He's done most of your favorite record covers, whether it's Public Enemy or Minor Threat or Bad Brains or whatever. He's lived probably 100 lives. Most photographers don't get a fraction of what he's got accomplished, but he just happened to be the right place at the right time for 3 different major scenes: the hardcore punk scene in New York and DC, the skateboard, surf, Dogtown, Venice, Santa Monica scene early on, and then all of the early hip hop stuff through Def Jam. Incredible eye and incredible talent. And I feel like I was seeing all of the stuff he was doing as a kid, going back and forth, being like hip to all that shit way before a lot of people were, at least in my circle. So I always, you know, call it just that. But yeah, it was a good thing, you know, looking back. And even as I tell you this, you know, there's no real story of woe. You know, I made a lot of bad choices moving forward, and it ended me up in a lot of shit. And then I've done a lot of things since then to recover. So.
Well, firstly, thank you for laying that out. It parallels so many other people that have been on here. And one thing I see, a lot of times there's an inception almost of like the World War II era. You know, I think myself included, a lot of us have this romanticized image of all our vets coming home, ticker tape parades, they're all happy, they roll up their sleeves and they go to work. Behind the scenes, as I talk to more and more people, you realize that no, that's not the case at all. And then you fast forward another generation. Now you're starting to see that kind of second generation of trauma. And then you've got broken homes, and you've got, you know, abuse in the household. You've got single mothers who aren't seeing their children because they're trying to, you know, pay the bills. So were you ever able to find out kind of the generation before, maybe what caused your dad's road to prison, what caused your stepfather's road to addiction?
You know, I never did, and I don't. It's a good question, but it seems to me, I don't know much about my father's family. But I've met a few of them online. Facebook is a strange and interesting place, and some of them seem well adjusted and fit, and some of them were crazy like me. And on my stepfather's side, they were, like I said, his brother. He had a great life. You know, they may have had a beer or two, but they knew when to put it down, or at least it didn't. You know, I didn't see any alcoholism on that side myself. So I don't. Yeah, I'm echoing what you're saying is 100% true in my thing. I don't know prior to that. I'm certain on the O'Connor side that alcoholism runs through that family lineage, and some brothers and sisters did better than others. So, but I don't know in detail enough to answer that question. And I would love to know. Listen, I knew my father was a career criminal, and I have a lot of friends, a handful of friends on NYPD. And I said, can you look up so I can have a better picture of what kind of stuff he was doing? And they couldn't. They said it was before those records got rolled into the digital thing, and a lot of things. And he was, he was a lot older than my mother. Well, a decade older than my mother. My mother's probably in her mid-70s now. So, it's going back to a time where a lot of those stuff. And then he was murdered when I was 17. He was homeless by the time he was going in and out of prison, in and out of the, homelessness. And somebody for fun, actually, it's ironic. And I say this a lot, and I don't, he was killed, unfortunately, for no reason but for somebody, I guess, to get their kicks. But the police chief's son of Staten Island decided to light a bum on fire. That happened to be my father. So he was burnt alive when he was homeless. I'm an advocate for the Second Amendment. And I believe that, my Constitution guarantees me the right to bear arms and protect myself, my family, and my loved ones. And as much as I, despise the act that person did, I'm not anti-cop. I'm not anti-gasoline. I'm not anti-matches. You can kill somebody in so many ways, or do destruction in so many ways. What I am is like anti-ignorance and anti like those kind of actions. I don't know what kind of mind state you got to be in to do that. That being said, there's some stuff, obviously not, to that level, but I've done a lot of stupid things in my life. Looking back, that's seconds and inches away from sheer disaster for somebody else, for myself, for everybody involved. And so I really, it's a tough one, but it's funny that you brought the broken home thing up. I talk to people all the time, because of the position I have now with the museum and being in recovery. And it's tough for me, as much as I love hip hop and what it's done, the effect, it's had a wonderful effect on my life, but there's also a negative side of it that doesn't get discussed a lot. And it's heartbreaking, really, because all of the stuff that can end you up, all of the professions, let's just call it the streets, right? It's not even hip hop alone, but hip hop glorifies all the stuff that as a 53-year-old adult who's turned the corner on all of that stuff that I despise. If you're in the streets and you're a thug, you're a pimp, you're a pusher, you're whatever, like those occupations are held on high. You know what I mean? Any other place that's not only a prison sentence, it's like the worst thing you could be. And as a young kid, I gravitated to that mindset, and I feel because I didn't have anybody at home and telling me that shit. And then when I would hear stories about my father and him being a thug and him being a gangster or a tough guy or whatever you want to call it, and then add all of the watching Scarface as a kid or all of the movies, I just gravitated towards outlaw culture and street culture. And, it's really, it's a double-edged sword, because it's like, I'll always love the rebel. You know what I mean? I'll always have, and that's really what people love about the American spirit, is we're rebels, and that there's that undercurrent of that. But when you really are in that life, man, it's like, it's jails, institutions, or death. There's nothing cool about it. And I bought into it hook, line, and sinker, and it cost me dearly for a long time. And it served me when I was younger. I didn't need a lawyer or somebody to look over my contracts, because if they went bad, I'm just going to do you in. There's no, the threat of that, like, hey, if you do me dirty, there'll be hell to pay. People understood that. And that's cool in your 20s if you can, if you can get away with it. As you get older, you realize that ain't it. And so it's tough for me now, man. As much as, like I said, and it just is what it is. And I don't care what anybody, in hip hop or the culture or the streets think about this shit, because it's just the way it is for me. I think a lot of things could have been different if there was a man in the family who was sober and took the role of a father, or my father was actually just did what a father should do, as opposed to, but they were both stepfather and my father were sick people. They had an illness, and they didn't understand that there was a solution for it, or they didn't want the solution, or who knows, but it's easy for me to look, and I meet a lot of families, man. I meet a lot of kids, and you can see the ones that from broken homes that there's something's different about them. And the chances are, and I don't know the averages, but I'm guessing that the chances are a lot better if you have the nuclear family unit intact, and especially if they give a shit. I think your chances are better. If you don't, my advice is to get a good education and to, keep your nose clean, because as far as I'm concerned, if there's systemic anything in the system, it's all based on your FICO score. Get a good credit score. People, when they're coming to sell you a house or loan you the money, they don't care you're black, white, or pinstripe. They just want to know what your credit score is and really what your worth is. And there's no way better. For me, I always, and this is, I'll tie it together, but for me, no matter how well I do, I'll always have a healthy fear of homelessness. And the only thing that will keep me guaranteed, for the most part, never to experience homelessness again, is to stay sober and to work hard. So that's what I do for that. I think if there's anything to keep me keep doing better in society, it's be a good guy and make sure your credit is intact, because really it's hard to move if you have a bad, if you're not on point with that. I got a 9th grade education, and my credit score fluctuates between the high 700s to the low 800s. That's not bad for a guy who was physically, morally, and spiritually bankrupt, and definitely came into recovery in debt. And so slowly but surely, one foot in front of the other, I've been able to right those things. And so if there's news for anybody who doesn't know, I wish my father or my stepfather would have knew that there was that recovery is possible. And I'm living proof of that. So, yeah.
Well, and you talk about the kind of the theme that joins all of us, whether it's, gangs, murdering each other, whether it's addiction or suicide or domestic violence or, whatever, including deciding that you're going to light a homeless man on fire. That's the underlying thing to me is mental ill health. That's what we all suffer from, no matter what your skin color or your religion. If you're going through that dark place, and it can be homicide, it can be suicide, it can manifest in so many different ways. But that's a discussion. And what's so powerful when I get to talk to you and all these different people of all backgrounds, some are elite, war fighters, and some, I had a guy who's a boy soldier in Sierra Leone, who, by the way, was a huge hip hop fan. So that's the power of music. I was a little farm boy in England, huge hip hop fan. But that's the conversation I think that needs to be had. I mean, the war on drugs, the war on gangs, it's not working if you're not fixing children. You're not stopping the machine that is creating traumatized children that are giving no, positive role models that are then fumbling their way through. Some become astronauts and they're incredible, but many of them find themselves in a much darker path.
The hard part, as you say that, I agree, but then there's that part of like, some kids can play, video games ad nauseum and never decide to do anything crazy, right? And some people can listen to hip hop and never decide to join a gang or go sell drugs or whatever. Unfortunately, if I'm to believe I'm hardware, right? The software that I put in there was telling me, all of the stuff that I was reaffirming, all of the street stuff that I was interested in. And so I'm not suggesting that people don't love hip hop or listen to hip hop or watch Scarface or watch whatever movie, some shoot 'em up shit. I just think that the way I grew up, it was a sort of, I definitely feel like I suffered some post-traumatic stress. And I feel like it was all fear-based because I never had the stability at home. And I was always warned or reminded that this too can change at any time. There was a lot of threats to be shipped off to boys' homes. And I also remember feeling, the fear that my mother projected, that she was living paycheck to paycheck, and it was not easy and it was stressful. So there was always that instability thing. And then as a young kid, I start to see like the cocaine era starts to hit, and everybody who's like, in high school, I knew a lot of kids that were starting to sell, small amounts, but big amounts. If any amount is big, I guess, at the end of the day. But, less than an ounce, I'd say at first, but weekly. And they got nice clothes, and they got pagers, and they got Kangles and gold chains. And in hip hop, that was everything. And there was no way I could even work a job that would pay that kind of money to afford me those things. And I was so obsessed with having those things that I was willing to do whatever it took to feel a part of that. And I don't know that normal kids do that. Right. I think they look at it like anything else. It's entertainment. Yeah, it's about, whatever, the rah-rah shit, but they don't maybe try to emulate that to the 10th power. I unfortunately did. And, looking back, like, I'm not proud of that. When I got here, I was at a restaurant and they were giving me a lot of press when I first came here, which I hadn't had that kind of press since like the early days of House of Pain. And two kids, they might've been 12 years old. They were like hovering around the table. We were like at some burger joint or something. And the kids finally come up to me and they said, "Mr. O'Connor." And I was like, "Oh, wow, here we go." Like, you're that young calling me Mr. O'Connor. Now I feel old. But they said, are you him? Are you the guy from the Outsiders House Museum? And I got this big smile. I said, "Absolutely." They said, "Hey, we just want to thank you for doing what you do." And it was the first time like strangers had thanked me. And I tell you that to tell you that it was refreshing not to be Danny Boy from House of Pain. It was, "Are you Mr. O'Connor from the Outsiders House Museum?" And I felt like the page had been turned, and that was proof of like my new life could ensue. And although I'll always be proud of being from House of Pain and what we did, and everything that encompasses that, it was nice to be like, okay, this is real now. I'm moving forward with the second phase of my life, which is, started at 50. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and I can imagine how powerful that must be. And I want to get to the kind of House of Pain journey, but just before we do, just to mirror kind of what you said, it's something I've discussed on here a few times. Like, being this little farm boy and loving hip hop, I still found myself drawn towards the positive one. Like, that was the message. I'm like, okay, well, this relates. I mean, I'm standing in a field full of sheep, so it's not quite, South Central LA, but, drawing the kind of pull yourself up, the very positive message that came out of it. But I've kind of highlighted this point. If you look back at, for example, Ice Cube with "Fuck the Police" or Ice-T with, "Cop Killer."
Cop Killer, sure.
The irony now, they're both making a lot of money playing cops on television.
Of course.
And for me, as a 48-year-old man who's also matured and spent a whole career in the fire service, watching the real, behind the curtain of gang violence and addiction and, prostitution and all these things that we get to witness and scrape off the floor. To me, it's like, well, where are these voices, these older voices of hip hop that are saying, look, we got to change the storytelling. Yes, there are some things that are a reality here, but if it's like, it's projection, we're going to keep it this way if we keep talking about it. When are the ones saying, look, I get it that back then we made this money and, that was kind of what we were thinking. And we've got to be honest, it sold records and it made us money. However, I love the gurus and the Nas's and all those that are, putting the positive stuff out there, and I just cringe when I see male or female with this, just feeding the fire of you're going to be stuck in the hood.
I mean, I can imagine if I had a daughter and she was listening to the WAP or exactly. That kind of, I would be like, what the? But again, we had that stuff too, so it's one of those double-edged swords, man. You know what? You ask, where's the guy? Ironically, it's Kanye. I mean, Kanye says all of the right things. And people, the hood disowns him for half of it, but he's saying right shit. It's mindset. It's mental slavery, and if you keep planting the same seeds, you're going to keep reaping the same harvest, and again, this is not life on life's terms, is that there'll always be that fascination with street culture, whether it's street culture that looks like outlaw bikers or street gangs or just whatever it could be. There's always the good and the bad of that. And we'll always be fascinated with the underside of any culture. I love Burroughs. I love the poets that talk about it. I just think hip hop was so solidified in that, and it captured so many minds that it almost put like in my mind, it was okay. Keeping it real, you can go too far. You know what I mean? And I'm not blaming it for anything. Listen, I could get those same messages other places, but you're right. I don't know, thinking out loud, other than Kanye. When Kanye speaks, it's so out there that it makes sense. And it's not that it's like he's like in touch with some other, like, but when you break down what he says, when you hear him on Joe Rogan, I heard him on TMZ even, and they were like slamming him for what he said, but I'm like, he makes sense. It's like he talks about all of that kind of stuff. He has a really good understanding of that, which is rare, especially at his level, to be in touch with God and to be in touch with, not that, other artists haven't been, but he can articulate it. It just seems like the streets don't want to hear what he's talking about. But I heard what he was saying, and I was like, man, not for nothing, I kind of mirror what you're saying in that. He's concerned. I mean, I think he's a little bit touched too. But sometimes you ride that line of genius and insanity. And sometimes the stuff sounds insane. But a lot of new concepts or foreign concepts sound insane until they don't. You know what I mean by that? And so, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't blame. I blame hip hop for giving me a good ladder for the foundation of a good life. It saved me in times. I lived for hip hop music. I'm a b-boy until I die, and that I've been other things. I've been an outlaw biker. I've been a new wave dude. I've been into mod and ska culture. I went through every phase as a kid. A preppy, whatever. And those are not me. Those are phases that I went through that are a part of me. But I'll always be a b-boy. For those at home that don't know what that is, that's the original thing is a break boy, but it's a hip hop head from day one. It's like I'm a b-boy. Like I still rock. I still collect sneakers to a certain degree. I can still, when I sign my name, I tag it, and I love that I'm always going to be a small part of the hip hop legacy, and it's a beautiful thing. And hip hop is a beautiful thing. And there are a lot of people, but I gravitated to the stuff you're talking about, NWA, Ice Cube, and worse. We made worse. La Coka Nostra made worse. And as I started to reflect back on that, I'm like, we're talking crazy shit. And it's from mature minds, man. And if a young kid starts to dabble in it, which they always do, it's easy I could understand why, because I did it. It was to not understand the boundaries of like reality and fantasy or hyperbole and whatever. So enough about that. I just don't want people to come away thinking I'm bashing hip hop, especially, hip hop didn't make me. I made some hip hop, you know what I mean, with my friends, and hip hop embraced us, and the fans embraced us, and it was a stepping stone to other things, and it's a big part of my life. It really, the professional part of it only lasted about 6 years. My involvement prior to that was probably maybe close to around a decade, which felt like forever when you're young. I was in hip hop around 14 years old, 13 or 14. Since Rapper's Delight, but that was solidified when Curtis Blow and Grandmaster Flash started putting out those singles. And from then on, I went through those other phases, always bringing hip hop with me. When I was a mod, I still listened to a lot of hip hop. I just felt those other subcultures, they weren't vast enough, and there wasn't enough of us to really, take it too far. And with hip hop, it felt like there was enough room for endless expansion, if that makes sense. And so, and you know what, we were definitely part of that punch you in your face type of hip hop. That's the type of music we listened to. That's the type of music we made. And it's what we're known for. But if I have any regrets, it's that, maybe I echoed a lot of those stereotypical bullshit glorifications of shit that's not really cool anymore. It's not cool to punch people in the face anymore. It's not cool to be a criminal. It's not cool to do those things. And sometimes, I felt like those were the only things that I could probably do because I didn't feel smart enough. I didn't feel talented enough. I didn't feel, and that's messaging that I, was giving to myself. Nobody was telling me that. I just felt that way. And, I learned, a while ago that I don't have to believe everything I think, and that's also pretty powerful stuff, because just because I think it doesn't mean I have to buy it, and to believe it. And my mind likes to go all over the place. And this is why I meditate. I do a gratitude list. I do a lot of service work because the day before the grace of God go out, it's easy for me to forget what I've been through. And it's easy for me to fall right back into it. And with long-term sobriety, I can assure you this is just for me, but I've seen it in other people, so I won't speak for other people. But on the 15th of this month, I'll have 17 years consecutive sobriety, of consecutive sobriety. And when things happen and if you're not in a spiritually fit and in a good spot and working when I'm not, I don't know what somebody else is, but when I'm not, I never think about relapsing and using drugs or alcohol again. I think about putting one in my head, you know what I mean? And saving the last bullet for myself. And that's how tricky this thing can get. It's like whack-a-mole. I hit one down and two other ones pop up that I didn't even know existed. So I have to be mindful, and I have to be very I make more meetings now, or people go, with almost 17 years, why do you still need meetings? Because my head is still telling me all kinds of stuff, and if I'm not working on myself on a daily basis, I'm in trouble, and so I can gloss over the House of Pain thing. It was in three easy little House of Pain was a godsend. I was doing everything you would need to do from about 16 till about 20 to end up in prison. Whether it was credit card theft, we were reprogramming old credit cards before there was a chip in it. We were robbing and stealing. We were selling drugs. And I say we, basically I was, and the people I was running with. And then I ran into Everlast, who I went to high school with and knew him from our area. I was a fan of his first record that he had on Warner Brothers when he was signed to Ice-T. I knew that was over for him. And at the time when I called him, I hadn't talked to him in a while. I could hear his mother in the background throwing him out of the house as he was on the phone with me. And I said, dude, are you okay? And he's like, no, I got to find a place to live. My mother's freaking out. I said, I'll come pick you up. And he came to my spot. My spot looked like the Grinch's sled. And we had stole so many shit and bought so much shit on credit cards. He thought he was just in heaven. And I put some new clothes on him. I hooked him up with a bunch of CDs and gave him a room in my cousin's house where we were all living. And we basically started to spitball and talk about putting a group together. And he loved the Irish thing that I was talking about. And he loved the logos that I was doing. I was always like doing a little graphic art and graffiti. And before long, we put a group together. Before long, he wrote 3 hits on a demo. We got signed at Tommy Boy Records, and we were off to the races. And it was fun. Then it was fun with problems. And then it was just problems, just like my drinking and using was. And when it was good, the first album was great. We had great times. I got to see the world. We all got to see the world. We all got rich overnight. We all got semi-famous or celebrity status overnight. We made a big impact, and it was good. And then the second album came out, and it didn't live up to the expected success. It was supposed to be bigger than the first album, and it was not. I think some of that was conscientious choices that Everlast made, not to do a pop sellout song to, retouch to the jump around thing. And he did the album he wanted to write, and he was the writer. So it was up to him, and we supported that. I remember there was debates we would take meetings, and they're like, we don't hear like a clear breakaway radio hit. And he was dead set against doing that, because it was at that time for white guys to be in hip hop and be respected, you had to stay away from selling out. That was like the biggest thing the worst mistake you could make was to do like a Taco Bell commercial or just sell out. And he was like, I'm not selling out like that. And so he made a good record. The second record was cool, but it didn't do the numbers. And by the third one, we're all pointing at each other. We're all going different directions. We all are growing at different paces. And we were all kind of like just not feeling each other. And he tried to put two other dudes that we grew up with, per se, in the group. And it was like two different groups. It might as well have been called Everlast with Friends, the third album. And it's a highly regarded record amongst a lot of House of Pain fans. I don't love it because there's too much like animosity associated with it, but I understand it is a good hip hop record. It's just not a House of Pain record as far as I'm concerned, because there was very little of my anything in there. And in order to be House of Pain, it's got to be the both of us. So that was that. We broke up. We didn't talk to each other for about a decade. He went on to get Grammys and sell a million records. Lethal went on to producing some Limp Bizkit and joining the group and selling millions of records. And I had no B plan and just started to do drugs to make it all go away. And so at the end of about 4 years of downward spiral, losing the house, the cars, all of the trappings of a successful rap career, I ended up couch surfing, at a girlfriend's house. Or I was living in an apartment, small apartment with a girlfriend, strung out on methamphetamines. And it was one day on Ventura Boulevard in the Valley that I ran into a guy that I knew was sober. And he said, "You don't look so good." I said, "I don't feel so good. Are you still going to those meetings?" He said he was. And I said, "When can we go?" He said, "How about tonight?" And I took him up on it. And it was a good run. I'll spare you the long story, but first year I did everything I was asked to do. I stayed sober the full year, could not believe it. Life started giving me good breaks again. Year 2, I made a solo record and got paid handsomely for it. Year 3, the label falls apart. I spent all that money and I start to get the fuckets. And I decided that, you know what, meth had ruined my life, but maybe drinking was still something I could do, since I had learned so much about myself in those 3.5 years of sobriety. And so I decided to test it. The program I work, the 12 steps, says if you don't think you're an alcoholic to your inner core, go test it. Go try some controlled drinking. So I thought, yeah, I'll take them up on that. And I did, and it lasted about 72 hours before I was right back on methamphetamines. And that ensued. I ended up going on a 3-year death march. When it was all said and done, I had a warrant for my arrest. My car had been impounded and sold at auction. My teeth were falling out of my mouth, and I was living on a warehouse couch in Hollywood, and hopeless and sick and tired of being sick and tired, homicidal and suicidal. And I tried to go back and forth through the program. I couldn't hear it anymore. My head was so clouded with drugs and upset and depression. And finally, I just got a window of opportunity to take another meeting. I don't know why this one worked, but I felt that if I didn't go to this meeting, it would be pretty much, the last chance. So I went to the meeting, and for the first time, I got willing again. I thought I was before. And that, like I said, is this 15th, it'll be 17 years ago that happened. And this time I didn't want my old life back. I wanted a chance at a new life. I think the first sobriety, I thought if I was a good boy, God would give me my old life back, which would have been that hip hop career and the Ferrari and the big house and all that shit. And this time I just wanted a chance at a new life. And that's what I've been working on ever since. And it hasn't been perfect. Life. It's been a lot of very high highs, but there's been a lot of low lows. I've had businesses in between. I've had businesses go bad. I've been sued. I've been fucked over. I may have fucked people over. I'm sure I did in some capacity throughout these 17 years. I was happily married, then I got divorced. It wasn't it wasn't what I was looking for. And a lot of, just life on life's terms is this way, and, but me staying sober and me doing the work, which is the 12 steps, keeps me balanced and it keeps me prepared. And it's nothing that life can throw at me so far, and it's threw a lot at me, that, I just deal with it one day at a time. And I take it as it comes. And I find myself in the center of a pack of people who are all doing what I'm doing. They're doing the impossible. They're working every day on doing what they need to do to be spiritually fit, to walk through life on life's term with grace and dignity. And so by the men and women that have come before me and the people that I help that are after us, my deal is to always be of service.
Well, just going back to the height again, I don't want to drag you through the whole House of Pain story, but one thing is such another comment on it. I've done almost 600 episodes now, and so there's some very resounding themes that come out of it. And there's always this kind of reoccurring thing of what you think will fill that void, what will think, will give you that acceptance or that self-esteem, especially when it's external, getting to that pinnacle and still being unhappy. And one of the guys became a friend, Josh Brolin. I mean, he talks about his addiction and the steps have absolutely worked for him, and he attends his meetings, has fun with his meetings. But so there you are, you got this absolutely huge, album. You were talking about traveling in Ferraris. Was there any point where you felt fulfilled, or were you always kind of chasing that, even if it was subconscious?
Yeah, no, there was a few times, man. They were very few and far between, and similar to smoking crack. And I didn't smoke a lot of crack, but I have tried crack. And crack, unfortunately, the first hit is the one, and everything after that is chasing this thing that just, it'll never feel that good again until you get off of it for enough time and then retry it again. And then there were times where I thought if life just stayed this way, it would be euphoric. The right amount of money, the right amount of things. I refer to that thing you're talking about as that God-shaped hole. And no matter what I throw down it, don't fix it. And there's a million isms. If I've watched people, they get sober from drinking and using, and then they start gambling and sex addiction, or there's a million different, things that shopping, eating, just people, we throw these things to try to make us feel better. I've also heard it described that somebody said, hey man, I never lost anybody, from experiencing the fear, but I've watched so many people die trying to avoid the feelings and not deal with those things. And it really comes down to that. That's why being spiritually fit in recovery is everything, because that's what I did. Drinking was my solution. Using was my solution. My problem was life on life's terms. If I could just have a little bit more of this, or you could just let me get paid for this forever, or if I could just have this amount of success every record, it was all conditional. If I could just have these cars, I'd be good. And yeah, there's never, you get those cars and then you're still needing 2 motorcycles and a jet ski. It just never ends. And so it's an inside job. Anybody who's doing recovery will tell you it's an inside job. It's like the work has to come from inside. The outside stuff is great. But I'll always have a thing for shiny things. I just am not willing to go to the lengths of, insanity, what I used to have those things. And they don't define me as much as they did before. I'm going to be lying to tell you that I don't like things. But they change. As I grow and as years go by, I need those things less and less to really make me feel good. They're more utilitarian at this point. But if I have to have them, or if I want to have them, then I insist on having the ones that I want are the best. So I have less of the things that I'm interested in, but the ones that I do have, I try to make sure that they are the ones. But yes, you're absolutely right. And that was another appeal to hip hop. I mean, to be outwardly like gratuitously showing the wealth on the outside. I mean, everything is about appearance, right? Like all of the sneakers had to be top notch. The jewelry had to be truck. It had to be oversized. Everything was like an extension of your wealth. And that it's a tricky one, man, because that kind of wealth is like, I see it now in like YouTube stars or TikTokers or whatever. They're making ridiculous amount of money. But a lot of rappers never, especially in the golden era, like, you're looking at rappers that got big chains, but that might be the extent of their wealth, hung up in a chain in the car. And if you look at their career span and the records the numbers that they sold, they're not what people are expected to sell nowadays, right? Some of your favorite hip hop acts maybe only went gold, which is 1 million records. Like, how long can you live off 80s record where you sold 1 million records in the 80s and you're not touring, and because there's no real money for you to tour? Where do you get money like that anymore? And that was no different from us. I got $1.25 million t-shirt deal, our first album, which was nothing had to be recouped. So it was like straight money into the bank. So I made, I got an $800,000 advance on allowing a company to license the logo from me. And, it fixes you at 20 something. That kind of money sure does, but it's temporary. And then spending it like it was going to keep coming every year was my mistake, because it didn't come every year. It did not. It lasted about 2 years on an upward trajectory, and then it just drops off a cliff. And the cliff is the part that you're like, oh shit, not me. How could this be? You know? And then watch Cypress Hill keep going on. And I'm sure they had bumps in the road, but visually, if you look at the arc, it's been nice. It's been kind of like a steady progression to the top. And then they've kind of just been on cruise at cruising altitude for the better. And I'm sure there's a million things that I didn't see, behind everybody has that. But House of Pain, you can look and it goes straight up and it goes poof, and it comes crashing right down. And some of that is self-imposed and self-inflicted, but definitely is not great for the psyche. And it's definitely not good for an immature alcoholic addict with no real business acumen and no real, with a learning disability, and not just, and a lot of fear, you said something that stuck out to me. You said, how many episodes? 600?
600, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of episodes. And you can start to see, obviously way before 600, but you start to see, anomalies, right? You start to hear a lot of commonalities, and you're like, wow, you have a really good sample size to see, looking back, I see a lot of things like that too. And I forget where I was just going with that, because my dog, he loves to be in my lap. I just adopted this dog 2 weeks ago, and he is the most loving creature I've ever met. But I'm sitting on the bench, and he just almost fell off. You start to see things, and I like that you have that kind of sample size to see those things. And we were talking about God-shaped holes, and that's a very real thing for people who suffer from those, from the thing I suffer from. And it's the thinking. It's my perception is skewed. What I'm looking at is what I'm looking through, and what I'm looking through is distorted. And it's not what I was trying to say, because I forgot what I was trying to say, but it dovetails nice into what I'm going to say. Because even at 17 years, I still need you to tell me if I'm on point, if I'm where I should be. And I can't just run it by somebody who's like my buddy, who's not going to tell me, the truth, or he's just not going to hurt my feelings. So I have to really stay connected to the people that are walking the path with me. And I run stuff by people, and I'm able to articulate better, because I can't see things that you can see that I'm heading straight for at full speed. And when I get enough trust and faith that there's something out there that also is looking out for me, as long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, then it really, it puts me in a center where I feel I belong. And it connects me to God in that way that I don't feel any other way. So I believe in God, and it's a big part of my story as I grew and grow. But I feel it most when me and you don't even have to be suffering from the same thing that I do, which is the mental affliction of alcoholism and using. But I am able to find, when I talk about this and when I discuss it with other alcoholics, addicts, or people like yourself, I don't know your story in that way, but then I feel the hand of God in this conversation, and a power greater than ourselves, because me and you together is a power greater than just me, right? And so as I force multiply with people in the struggle that are working on the solution, that's powerful stuff. And I have a better chance when I have the hive mind in this way to keep me centered. So anybody out there that's trying to do this alone, good luck. It's a tough one. And everything I have that's good has come out of my sobriety, and it's contingent on my spiritual maintenance one day at a time. I don't think that was even what I was trying to tell you about House of Pain. Anything you want to know about House of Pain is great. I can fill in the blanks, but yeah, I don't, kind of dovetailed when my dog fell off.
No, it was
poor guy. He was hanging on too. He didn't fall, but he was hanging on with his two things when I caught up. Anyway, I hope any of that made sense.
No, it did. But then also you hit on something that's very pertinent to a lot of people listening. So the worst person to ask if you're doing well when you're a firefighter is another firefighter, especially if they're on your crew in your station, because you're getting your asses handed to you shift after shift after shift. You're seeing the things that we see. You're sleep deprived. You're dealing with some of the politics in the organization that you work for. And so this is something that's emerged, again, we talk about commonalities, is the people outside the bubble are the people that are. So the ones that you trust. So whether it's a family member, whether it's a close friend who's not in your circle, someone you came up with who isn't in House of Pain or touring with you. And that's such an important kind of perspective, because just like you said, and I've had that too, where I've been, low as far as never so much addiction, but definitely, depressive episodes, is you hit the nail on the head. I've talked about this. It's like you're underwater. Like you're not seeing and feeling clearly. I've always tell people like my adrenal glands must have been pooped out years ago because I don't have feelings. I don't have extremes. But my wife, my son, those are some of the best people for me to ask, hey, how am I doing through your eyes?
Yeah, no, I get it. Listen, my hat's off to you. My heart's with you. Anybody who's a first responder and in that line of work is really my heroes. We have a guy, Tim, who's on my board of directors at the museum, who was at Fire Station 3, which is in the neighborhood of the Outsider's house. He's now moved Midtown by the Harley Davidson dealership. But I've been on ride-alongs with both LAPD and TPD and Tulsa Fire Department. And you see a couple hour slice of what your day looks like. And it's completely different than what you would see on television, where you're like, oh, these good-looking fire guys, they're eating, they've got good recipes at this firehouse, they're working out, and they're doing it like, yeah, that's maybe a small part of it, but the stuff that you have to deal with, it's more than just putting out fires. It's dealing with car accidents, decapitations, shootings, stabbings, muggings, heroin addicts, methamphetamine addicts, just everything under the sun. You probably arrive there half the time way before the cops get there and have to sort everything out or stabilize somebody till the ambulance gets there, or till the cops and the ambulance, or whatever it needs to be done. And it's put a lot of clarity on what you guys do worldwide, and empathy as well, man, because that's a tough job, man. And you have to, you really have to have like a really good, I'm guessing that you have to have some type of fucking stability and some type of like balance, because you come into contact with a lot of stuff, or you become completely numb, and that's no good either. You don't want to be so desensitized to that you can't, nothing, that's also not so good. But my hat's off, literally and figuratively, to you, first responders, anybody who does that line of work, because you're underpaid, underappreciated, and definitely there's nothing without you guys. And so yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think firstly, thank you, but I think you're right, and it's funny. I actually went back through your Instagram and saw that you had a fire right next to one of the buildings that we're going to talk about in a minute, and they responded there. So there's that other tie-in. The person who connected us, NOCO, law enforcement, LA and NYPD. So another tie-in for our professions with you. So I would love to kind of hear, firstly, what worked for you that last time? Because I think that's very important. I know you felt a calling to go to the meeting, the steps themselves have worked, but what was it that worked there? And then walk me through the journey that ultimately took you to a 3-day layover in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right. So I don't know why the time I got sober 17 years ago was different than the other times I had tried, as I had relapsed with 3.5 years. Close to 3.5 years the first time I got sober. I made a conscious choice to leave sobriety because I thought I could control drinking, and that I just would stay away from the drugs that were hard, and that I could clearly say that I could admit that they had destroyed, me in that moment. And so I had tried to come back and forth for those 3 years. Sometimes I get a week sober, sometimes I get close to a month. Maybe I think I even got a month chip. But something inevitably would always bring me back out, whether it was there's always drama and tragedy in anytime you're going in and out. So that could look like a cell phone bill. My cell phone would get disconnected and I'd get the fuck it's, and I'm just like, fuck it, I can't. And I'd get high, and I try to figure a lot of stuff out while I was high. Methamphetamine is for a guy who has a scatterbrain and ADD and really hard to focus, gives me complete laser-like focus. And I felt like by doing that drug, that I was helping myself and solving a problem, even if it was costing me mentally and physically. I thought I could get ahead if I could just do this. And the deal I would make to myself was like, I'll just do this for another week, clean up my house. I mean, if I look around my house right now, it's a nightmare. I live at the corner unit at a historic hotel with, what do you call windows? I don't know. Anyway, it's a beautiful spot, but my shit looks like my desktop on my laptop, which is like shit all over the place because I'm constantly creating, juggling. I'm going back and forth to the museum. So I thought if I could just do this drug that would help me clean up my own stuff, organize my bills, all of the housekeeping stuff, right? All of the clerical shit that I'm terrible at, that it would be worth it. And then I would just pull the ripcord and get off the drug, and then I would then get clean. It never works that way. So it was always one more week, one more weekend, one more month, and then I'll get my shit together. But the time that I got sober this time, I was literally out of any options. I was dying inside, and I literally was suicidal and homicidal. Homicidal because I was kind of staying also at an apartment a block away, and a lady that lived lower than us was giving us problems, and that's a whole other long story. And I literally was like plotting her demise. And then there was part of me that was just like, I just should kill myself because this is just I was afraid that I wasn't going to die anytime soon by doing the drugs, that I was going to live to be 90 on my knees. And that was even worse than dying. And this guy called me in the right time. And my mindset was just like, fuck it, let's go. And I went. And in that moment, I just said, I'm going to stay willing no matter what. And there's been a lot of no matter what's that have come up, and I just keep on going. So that's that. I don't have there wasn't like usually good sobriety starts with the God help me prayer. That's that simple. And I'm sure I said, God help me in that thing because I needed it. And then what happens is, as I get clean, I take an old idea, which is La Coca Nostra, and I put it back together. La Coca Nostra was something that, in a nutshell, the DJ from House of Pain, we remained friends while me and Everlast remained estranged at that time. And he had a label deal at Geffen, and he was looking for acts. And I used to meet a lot of people because I was always outgoing and on the scene. And I met a kid from Boston named Slane, who was an incredible talent. And he reminded me like of what I first saw when I saw Everlast doing his thing. Was like, this guy is like a level above the levels that we know in our scene. And I thought I'd bring him to Lethal to make a record. And I also had met another kid from the Bronx, and then Lethal was working with another rapper. And we decided, instead of making 3 records with 3 solo artists, maybe we could put the 3 of those guys together and make 1 record. And 2 of them ended up staying in that group. We started adding people to it. They asked me if I would join as like the hype man and the creative director, since I had come up with the name and the logo. And I was like, absolutely. And Lethal would become the DJ. And then we recruited Ill Bill from Nonfiction, who was a fan of his work as well. And in the 11th hour on Facebook, Everlast reached out to me the first time in a decade saying, I love your new group. I want to get down with it. And I thought, okay, well, shit, this is weird. But I was like, okay, part of me was the validation that he'd just come out of the blue, wanted to be down with it. And part of me was a little worried, that what is the true cost of this thing? Because I had been burned by him before, as far as, him walking away from a group and leaving me high and dry. And not being concerned with whatever became of my life after he walked out, knowing that it would cost me. And all of us, really. He didn't seem to care about that. So I was, I felt like the prodigal son was trying to come home. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. We'd love to do a song with you. He goes, nah, I want to join the group. So I asked Ill Bill, and he was like on the fence too. He was like, well, fuck it. The guy can write hits, so let's do it. So we made the deal, and he came in the group, and we started touring. And the first tour we went on, we were an opening act for the Cottonmouth Kings, who were signed to the same label that we ended up signing to. And it ended us up on a 3-day layover. We played a show here at the Cain's Ballroom, which is a historic, old school cowboy, Western swing dancing legendary spot. The Sex Pistols played here, and everybody under the sun, but notably the Sex Pistols' second to last show ever in the U.S. on their first and only tour of the U.S., on the original run. It brought me here, and I realized when I was here that my favorite movie and book was filmed and written here, which was The Outsiders. And so on my day off, I ended up hiring a cab to take me around looking for these locations. And I was able to find the drive-in from the movie, the park from the movie, and by finding the park, I found the house. And was literally, to me, at the time, I may have had 5 years sober. I had just bought a new point and click camera, and I was highly caffeinated as always. And I thought, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like, Tulsa looked like Tulsa looked in the movie, which was filmed in 82, but was supposed to be portraying 67. And it was literally like I might as well have been on the back lot of like Universal Studios to a set that it was just still up from the 80s, because it was so realistic and so just like it was in the movies that I thought almost that I died and went to heaven. And by the time I get to the house and start taking photos, I look down and there's a for sale sign. So when I get back to the hotel, I look it up and they want $42,000 for that house. I was shocked. One, I was shocked that it was still on earth. Two, I was shocked that it was for sale. And three, how cheap it was. Because in LA, you couldn't buy a house for $42,000 since, I don't know, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, who knows? A long time is all I'm trying to say. And as much as I was intrigued by it, I thought, man, I don't know anything about Tulsa and I have no business. I was probably worth at best at that time, maybe $30,000. So I would have had to come up with another $12,000 just to buy the house. And although it would have been a smart investment because it was a house, I just didn't know anything about Tulsa. And I lived in Beverly Hills, California in a nice little apartment. So I thought, be careful, Danny. What ends up happening, I become obsessed with the place. I start doing a lot of urban exploring on that tour, which was a new concept. The convergence of having a smartphone, a tour bus with internet access, and Google became like a way for me to use that tour bus, because I was the only dude sober on that tour. So every time we'd pull into town, they were heading for the hotel to sleep it off, and I was heading out to find any type of point of interest from anything that was pop culture, pop culturally relevant to me. So if I was in Minneapolis, I'm looking for Purple Rain, I'm looking for locations from Purple Rain or Mary Tyler Moore Show or whatever. If I'm in Atlanta, I'm looking for the place that the Sex Pistols played on that first tour. I'm looking for anything that would have been, something that I could take an old photo off the internet and then mash it with a new photo and put that online. And in doing so, this is how I meet Naco Nolan, the former NYPD, now currently LAPD detective. And we hit it off like that. We start this thing called Delta Bravo Urban Exploration Team. And in a nutshell, all we are is just self-appointed pop culture detectives. Anything that strikes my interest from the past, I'll freeze frame it. I'll take a screen grab of it and I'll go, now, where was this baseball field from the Bad News Bears? Or where was this dugout from Fast Times at Ridgemont High? Or whatever your thing is. Album covers. Where's the LL Cool J album cover where he's on his Jaguar leaning on the school fence? And I found out it was in St. Albans, Queens at his high school. And I went back to that high school when I was in New York and I matched up the photo and I took the exact photo and then I superimposed them together in Photoshop and I posted them online for fun. And I started to attract a lot of people like-minded, and we still do it. It's still a real thing on Facebook, and it's got, I'm going to guess, a couple hundred members, but I'd say 20 people religiously, constantly, always producing content, looking for locations. And it was just a fun, clean hobby that anybody could basically do. There's no buy-in. It's not like you have to have anything to qualify or to be in the team. You just say you're in and you post the photos and you tag them with the tag and you're done. And what happens is it takes me across the U.S. because at the time, we did La Coca Nostra for a couple of years and then it kind of fizzled out for a million different reasons. And I was just talking about this yesterday, man. I said, you know what, if I'm going to be if I'm going to be cash poor, then I can look at it as also being time rich. And I said, I barely have enough to get by, but I have all this free time and I can either sit around and complain that I don't have any opportunities to make money right now, or I can use this downtime to do something that I'm passionate about and that I love and just take a break and do my thing. And so what I did was just that. I started to just scratch up enough gas money and enough, the files of the things I was looking for. And my wife would be at work and I would just go out on the day. Sometimes I grab Naco on his days off. Sometimes I grab other people. So a lot of times I went alone because everybody was working a real job. And I started to explore all of the things that were like, of interest to me, and a million things that weren't of interest that were maybe interesting to Nako or other people. And then it became this like lifelong passionate project that we do. There's no end to it. There's no end game to it. It's really to experience life and to enjoy life and to kind of get an end to like, where was that filmed or where was that shot taken? Now we know, and now it's shared collective information for other fans to go see. And what happened is I kept bringing me through Tulsa, Oklahoma. I realized that I didn't have to fly anywhere. I could drive this old cop car that I bought. I bought a retired, you could do this in the States. You could, once they get rid of the old fleet, they sell it at auction, and you can get a cheap, all blacked out, unmarked cop car and drive it around. And people don't know, at the time, people didn't know if you were really a cop or not, which makes great for exploring because nobody wants to mess with you when you're at locations. And when I stayed at the cheap hotels that I stayed at, nobody messed with my car because they didn't know if it was a cop car or not. And I started to just go across the US a lot of times by myself. And I would always make it to Tulsa. So it was a 2-day trip from LA. And I would always look at this house. And by 5 years of doing this, I started to get super worried. I was worried, and rightfully so, that the Habitat for Humanities, which is an organization that builds affordable houses in bad neighborhoods for people who wouldn't qualify for normal loans. And I'm a fan of what they do per se, but I wasn't going to be a fan if they tore down the Outsider's house. And they were going block for block. And every year there would be another block torn out and new homes put in. And they were about a block away from the Outsider's house when I thought, no, this is not going to be good. They're going to mess around and tear this house down and not even know that it's an important piece of American history. And so that's when I started to get scared, and I got scared enough to find out who owned it. And I had a buddy of mine do the deal, and we ended up making a deal. I ended up buying the house for $15,000. It's a steal. But on the same token, when I got to the house, because I bought it sight unseen, when I finally drove back out to take possession of the house, it was in such bad shape that everybody else told me, I don't know that it's savable. You might have just bought something that's a teardown, dude. And I didn't have any more money to spend. I was in it for 20 grand at the time. I paid 15 for the house, and I paid 5,000 for the tenants who were 8 months behind in rent to leave and get to another spot, which was awesome. As I look back, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but there are many times where I was faux homeless and had no money, and nobody offered me $5 grand to fuck off and go somewhere else. So God bless. And then I attribute again to my sobriety. As a 6'6" alpha male, I know nothing about restoring homes, nothing. And it's hard for me to say I need help, but I figured out that, I had been afraid of what people think of me for so long, and especially to not know was such a stigma. How the fuck do you not know how to do that? But I had to just get honest and say, I don't know the first thing about this. What I'm passionate about is the legacy, the story, and the house, but I don't know how to restore this house. If you're interested, could you help me? And I asked for help, and shockingly enough, which it seems to be the thing, if you ask for help, don't be surprised if the help shows up, and the help is just that. And little by little, this community surrounded me, and whether it was gifts in kind, meaning they'd say, hey man, that roof looks terrible. You want us to, we're a shingle company. We'll come out and fix the shingles. Or that thing is leaking into your fireplace. There was a chimney and it was leaking into the wood. They're like, hey, you need to flash that. I don't know what flash that meant. They knew what it meant. They'd come and flash the thing. And then there was a million little things like that. People would say, hey man, the grass is like atrocious. It's up to your waist. After work, me and my daughter will come and we'll mow your lawn. I'm like, who does that? Like, this is something that I don't know would have happened in LA or New York. And this is just being honest. But in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they cared. And little by little, we started to repair that house, and we got it back stabilized. And then the job was to go through it and make it look like it did in the movie. Simultaneously, I'm going out trying to collect everything under the sun that pertains to the movie The Outsiders. At the time, I had one poster when I bought the house. I'm proud to say we have the largest collection of Outsiders movie memorabilia, screen-worn wardrobe, and the largest Outsiders book collection known to man here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at the Outsiders House Museum. And it was really just a passion project that if I wrote it and you read it, you'd think I was bullshitting. And this is the way life is. And it would take me another 2 hours to unpack all the things that happened. But I can tell you this, and I tell this to school children, that I get asked to speak a lot because The Outsiders is mostly required reading for 7th graders. and they want me to come out and talk to the kids. And I always tell them who I am. I never, I feel like they're old enough to understand, that I'm damaged goods that has now, found a way out. And what I do tell them is this. I tell them that a good education, a good game plan, and the financials in order when you embark on a project like this, that sometimes you're going to have no real money, no real plan, but you're going to feel passionately about it. And instinctually, you're going to know that this is something for you. Jump in and do it anyway. The worst thing that happens is you fail and you learn. The best thing that happens, what happened for me, was that we did the impossible. I had no real money after what I put to get in the door. The place was in 100 times worse condition than I assumed it was in, because I had saw it online on Zillow when they were trying to sell it 5 years prior. And I had nothing to show if I was going to make a museum anyway, except for one poster. And in the end of 3.5 years, I had everything I wanted and then some, because it's amazing what we can do when you're dedicated and you're passionate about it. And so if it's one kid that needs to hear that, so be it. You know what I mean? Because I need to know that. And, I don't know how much you know about the author, but I'll just tell you that she wrote The Outsiders when she was 15 and a half. She was failing English and got a D+ in creative writing, or got a D+ in English and failed creative writing. One or the other. That's very low marks for a student to write a international classic. It has never been out of print in 54 years. And I'm told it sold more on the 50th anniversary than all the years combined. I don't know how that works, but that's the story. So we're sticking to it. She's still alive. She's the number one supporter of the museum financially and with donations of collectibles. And, it's amazing what happens when you get down and roll up your sleeves and get on into it. And I have a ninth grade education. I have no idea on how to restore homes, but people, when I talked about what I wanted to do, they heard my plea, because they knew I was coming from the heart and speaking to their heart, not from head to head, that I didn't have this budget and that I was using, that I didn't have a plan for how it was going to happen. I just said, hey, I love this book. I love this movie. And I think it would be a shame if this house gets erased off of the earth. I think we can do something better with it and turn it into a museum, and that fans from around the world can come see what this little girl at 15 and a half did by writing her book and the effect that it had on all of us. And people said, fuck yeah, I understand it. I'm going to help you. And everybody from Jack White donated 30 grand. When I ran into Billy Idol, he was playing here as a kid. Young kid, Billy Idol was my everything. I wanted to be Billy Idol so bad it hurt. I went to see Billy. He said, come on back, come in the dressing room. He said, how's the house? I said, the house? He said, The Outsiders house, mate. I said, you know about the house? How you know about the house? He's like, come on, mate. He said, I heard Jack gave you 30 grand. I said, yeah. I go, damn, so you do know about the house. He goes, I'd like to give you something too. I go, you would? He goes, yeah, not 30 grand, but I'm going to give you something. So he gave me a nice little check. I tell you that to tell you, man, my mind explodes when there's a million little stories like this. But the fact that, like, the 13-year-old me who went to see The Outsiders and fell in love with this movie because I saw my story being told for the first time on screen in a different era, in a different neighborhood, in different, aesthetics, but the same feelings of disconnecting, finding your tribe outside of the house that you didn't find at home, and sticking together at all costs. And to think that 30 years later or 35 years later that I would end up buying the house from the movie, and that Billy Idol would give me a check, and the author would give me $35,000 and some stuff from her personal collection. And her friendship is what means more to me than all of that. And there's 100, if not 1,000 stories just like it from anonymous people that did even more miraculous stuff. But I'd be here all day. But the takeaway from all of this is that, I saw an opportunity that maybe nobody else saw at the time. I felt very strongly about it, and I was willing to roll the dice, because what did I have to lose at that point? It was already close to being, out of money, but I greater than being out of money would have been to save what little money I had and then watch that house get destroyed. And without a plan and without a budget, I was able to ask for help and the help showed up. And that's powerful stuff for me, man. I'm not going to say that that's going to happen in every project I do or any project that you may do or may never happen, but it has happened. And every time I share the story, people say, yeah, I've had a similar situation that happened, or this is good information. Maybe that it gives somebody the confidence to try something, because again, what's the worst that could have happened? So I had a little less, 20 grand less than I had when I started, which I can make that up somehow eventually. It's not going to kill me. And I would have had a good lesson of, hey, man, next time you need this, that, and the third. But it worked out it worked out better than I could have ever imagined. And it's fulfilled me in a way that the House of Pain could have never done. And I'll end with this, being sober, when you work a program, the 12-step program, the last 3 steps are about giving back. It's trust God, clean house, work with others. And I think that my higher power, who I choose to call God, understood that I wasn't going to do the kind of service that I equate service in being, but that I could be a very good service to the community at large here by doing the Outsiders House Museum and making sure that I spend every day making sure that museum stays open, that it stays constantly promoted in the right way, and that I actively collect so that I can share a shared experience of her story, the story of Tulsa surrounding me and putting me up on high and helping me complete this, and what that looks like when you're sober, when you're passionate, and when you're humble to ask for help. Great things can happen, at least for a guy like me who was suffering from alcoholism and drug addiction and a million other things. That it's pretty miraculous. So I think for me, it's a redemption story. My own story is a redemption story. And I think there's hope in my story when I talk to other people about it and they feel that, and it inspires people to maybe do stuff similar, or just a good takeaway of everybody likes to see a feel-good story. And this is the feel-good story of the last few years in Tulsa, so it's been good. I've been here for 5 years. I'm never leaving. And I feel like the smartest guy who ever left Los Angeles. And my biggest fear is coming here, that you could stand still in Los Angeles and the world will come to you, because we have such great circulation of people traveling to see Los Angeles. But ironically enough, every month, if not, 2 or 3, 5 people from my past or people that I always wanted to meet are passing through or working here or just playing here or whatever. So every month I got somebody right now from LA who's visiting for the first time, just based off of my photos, who I knew. And I've been taking him around, and I have a band you may know, and I think it's secret that they're here, but your podcast, the Dropkick Murphys are here recording at the church studios for a week. And I'm talking to Ken Casey, and I'm going to show him around and give him the tour. And every month it's something like that. Someone's playing Kane's Ballroom. Someone's playing the BOK Center. Somebody's coming from East Coast to West Coast driving through, and they want to see Tulsa. And so I've been blessed to have the people in my life come through, and all kinds of people that I never thought would make it to Tulsa coming through. And it's just been sometimes I got to pinch myself that this has all happened. And now it gets real, because now I got to make sure not to fuck it all up. The pressure's on.
Well, I mean, that's such a powerful story to hear, and especially powerful. Like, a lot of people have kind of rebirth stories, and they themselves are incredible, but not a lot of people have. I had achieved everything that you're told on television will make you happy story, contrasting story. I had the fame, the cars, the girls. I had all this stuff. I was adored. I was on MTV when it played music, for example, a long time ago.
Yes, sir.
And then you have this, and then what truly brought you happiness was, and you touched on the word tribe, finding that tribe, finding that purpose, seeing that community does exist and people do give a shit. They just need to be led and be given a task. And that's what I've seen over and over again. The narrative of people are horrible. Yes, there are some shitbags in the world. There's no question. But I think ultimately people are good. But right now, I mean, there's, without getting political, but there's very little leadership from left, right, whatever. These people are not our role models by any means. So when especially in the community, when in your own town, you could you can literally touch a project that you see then makes a difference. That not only is bonding, but I think it's healing. And over again, the people that come out of whatever dark place they were in, that one of the most healing elements is altruism, is being able to give back. And that's the true purpose, I think, that ultimately heals so many people that were in pain.
You're absolutely right. And you know what? It's like doing a concert. If you're at a show and the crowd's all got their iPhones in your face and they're standing still, it's a tough hour and change, right? But if the crowd is wilding out and they're getting into it, it's reciprocal energy. So what I give at the house has been given back to me in double, triple, whatever. And then the word that you also touched on, which is super important to me, and I realized it when I've been here for a couple of years, I finally have a purpose, like a true purpose. And I didn't have, House of Pain didn't have a purpose. My purpose had been served the second Eric said, Everlast was like, let's make a band. He took the wheel from there. I had done the logo, the style of it, the name of it was all mine, and the Irish centric shit was who I was. But after that, it was like I was in a car while he was driving, and when he wanted to stop or pull over. So my purpose was just to do what he said to keep this thing going. And when it was all said and done, I couldn't recreate the magic without him. And I was left really on the side of the road, not knowing what to do. And that's a real powerless, like sad, like state of mind to be in, where you feel like, for the rest of my life, and everybody expects me to go make a rap record or do whatever. So it took me a long time to come out the other side of that, to have a real purpose. And my purpose is this, is like I said, that every day that the house is not open is in my book, a day that could be better, because we do Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're open to the public, and we do Monday through Thursday for private tours or school tours. But I also do a 12-step meeting at the house. We do events at the house, and I just got an order today. Somebody wants to do a wedding at the house, which is great. I'm looking forward to. But I use the house as a community property, and I feel like the many events we can put there, the better. And it gives me a purpose. Like I said, my purpose is to make sure that is maintained and in tip-top shape, and that I constantly am on the lookout for new and exciting items that may pop up on the market, or discover other ways to, dig out collections. And I couldn't have planned it better. And I'm glad it just happened the way it was supposed to happen for me. I stay in gratitude every day. There's no bad days. There's just days that I could have done something a little bit better, or could have just went a little bit better. But I feel good, like I said, to be on the other side of this thing and to finally have found my purpose, my true purpose, which is this. So,
well, it's funny as well, because I remember watching the film when I was a kid, and I'm 48 now. I just had to help my son through his English project about a year ago now. Well, he worked through the book. Now, the way they analyzed it, I was completely useless to him. Some of the questions that they were breaking down. But, so there, I've had that multi-generational kind of view with the story. Just a complete tangent for a moment. There's a place, concert, Welcome to Rockville every year. Cypress Hill's actually played a couple of times. I've seen them, but the Foo Fighters, tragically, Taylor was there. This was a couple of years ago now. They did a set with Billy Idol. One of the best fucking concerts I've ever seen in my entire life. Because Billy came on, John Travolta was backstage. He came on to be just waved, but he's been on the show too. But
John Travolta?
Yes, yeah, he came on. He's local. He lives here in Ocala. So yeah, he's kind of like you are in Tulsa, as far as being invested in the community you live in, rather than just kind of hiding in a house. He's very much so. I love
everything about John Travolta. As a kid, he was the Brooklyn archetypal character of, like, between Vinnie Barbarino and what's his name, in Saturday Night Fever, Tony Manero. I mean, it was like a god amongst men. As a kid, I saw that movie. My mother took me to it, and other people in the neighborhood cursed my mother for bringing a kid at 12 years old or 10 years old to see the movie. But she loved that she used to dance in Brooklyn, so that was her era that they're portraying. But yeah, I didn't know that's. Listen, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Taylor died of an overdose or a drug overdose.
I believe so, yeah. At first they were talking about, I think, they had chest pain, but I think from what I understood, what I read, the toxicology, there was a whole cocktail. Yeah. And I know, even if you had chest pain, it was probably from, what's in your body.
Yeah. Of course. And you know what? It's so super unfortunate. I can share, we were doing a festival it had to be the late 90s with House of Pain. And I don't remember where it was, but I was standing on stage after our set to see Alanis Morissette. And she was all the rage. So whatever year that, You Ought to Know song came out, that was the year. Maybe 95, 94, I don't know. And I was, because I had my laminate and we were probably coming on after or before, I don't remember. But I was standing there and it didn't take 30 seconds for me to go, who cares about Alanis Morissette? Who the fuck is this drummer and where's this guy coming from? So that's where he started originally, playing drums for her. And he had fans on him and his hair was flailing like he's riding a motorcycle. And he was just like, he was killing it. And I'm a super fan of drumming. If I could do my childhood over again, I begged my mother for a drum set. My cousin had a drum set. I was obsessed with Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, but I always wanted to be a drummer. And so anytime I see a band, if the drummer ain't the shit, I'm out. And then he joined the Foo Fighters, which was great. But I mean, that's another, unfortunate, like he had everything. He had everything. And addiction is a tricky bitch, man. I've watched people with 20 something years relapse. Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, dude was a staple in the community, doing all the right things until, and that's why I don't fuck around. I'm sure he didn't either. And that's why all I'm guaranteed is today. You know what? And that's the one day at a time concept. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery. And I love to fuck with both. Oh, I'm not going to get all the things I need tomorrow. Or shit, if I just would have went left yesterday, I would have ended up where I needed to be. I get so caught up in the before and afters that I miss the beauty of today. And all we have right now is today. Today I'm sober. Today I have enough money to get through the day. I have a beautiful little dog in my lap. I have a refrigerator full of food. I got coffee at the ready. I mean, I have so many things to be grateful. Hot shower, good views, really no complaints. I can find a lot of stuff to complain about. The tax rate, the gas prices, everything. But so what? Everybody has to deal with that shit. I may sound like I don't know what I sound like, but it's true, man. It's the simple things now that I used to take for granted that are everything to me. And I have really no complaints other than that. It's up to me to go out and do whatever I want to do and build it into something that I want to see it to, if that makes sense,
Yeah, absolutely. No, it does. Now, I want to ask you one question and go to some closing questions so I can let you go. But just one kind of interesting, again, going back on the Instagram a little bit, I saw that one of the people that you had visit the house was Matt Dillon, obviously someone that you, related to when you were watching the film, 40 years prior. So what was that like seeing, as someone who you had basically been moved by as in his performance? And then what was his perception or experience of going back into the house that he was acting in all those years ago?
Right. So, I mean, I've said it a million times in every interview I think that they've asked. I definitely want to be Matt Dillon so bad it hurt. That character, Dallas Winston, is who I try to emulate, his toughness. And between him and Ralph Macchio's character, Johnny Cade, is where the center would probably be most accurate. I can relate to Johnny's pain and his feeling, vulnerable and emotional about, but smart enough to hide it well, like Dally did, and tough enough to do something about it. I'd always hoped that he would come. Early on, when I first bought the house, it was kind of a secret. And all of a sudden because I have a blue check on Instagram, when somebody else with the blue check follows, it notifies you. Same with Twitter. And all of a sudden it says, boom, boom. I'm like, whoa. And it's like, Matt Dillon's following you. I'm like, what? I thought it can't be real, right? But he blue check. And then all of a sudden I get this text from him. He says, listen, I heard you bought the house. Good shit. If you ever want to, if Susie's still in Tulsa, and if you ever want to talk to her, let me know. I could put you in contact. I said, brother, you have no idea how much this means to me. I said, I'm in touch with Susie, actually. And I said, and he said, in the text, he said, if there's anything you ever need. And I said, hey, first thing I want to know is, do you still have the St. Christopher medallion and the skull ring? And he's like, oh shit, man, that's been forever. I don't know where those are, but if I ever find them, I'll let you know. And I said, look, we're going to do a fundraiser. I'm going to keep you abreast of all of the shit we do. I never want to lean on you too hard. So if I do, please forgive me. But I said, you have a standing invitation to everything we do. And that was 5 years ago. We've done a few events. I've invited him. he replied back, "Hey, I'm on a movie right now he did one called the House That Jack Built. I think he was in Sweden or something at the time. The following year, he was like, I'm in Italy. It was just the timing was never right. And then I would send him some stuff and he just didn't respond, which was like, all right, he's a busy guy, I get it. And then randomly, somebody posted that he was going to do a Q&A in Oklahoma City for some art show, hoping that he would see the museum. And it wasn't anybody in my camp. She's a fan of The Outsiders and well-known amongst Outsiders fans. But I didn't get too excited because, again, the higher the expectations, the lower the serenity. And I just didn't want to set myself up for disappointment. And when I first bought the house, man, there was a lot of questions like, why doesn't Tom Cruise just give you $1 million to do this? And just and I'm like, that's not how life works. And if I had those expectations and none of the stars showed up from the movie, this house still had to be a sight to behold, regardless of their involvement. Otherwise, what am I building? I'm building another trap like House of Pain, where if Everlast leaves, we have an empty shell of a car that has no engine, right? So I didn't want to build a museum that was contingent on celebrities from the movie showing up all the time to make you want to come see it. So that was already a given. So the following day, I get a text from Esty Hinton. She said, "Listen, I'm so happy I could cry. Matt's coming and he's going to take me to lunch and then he wants to see the house." I was like, fantastic. She said, "I hope you're in town." I said, "Well, I'm in town. I'll be there." And then I looked at my Instagram and he's like, "Hey, brother, I'm in Oklahoma City. I'm coming to Tulsa tomorrow. I'd love to see the house." I said, "Yep, I just talked to Susie. I'll be there with bells on." And so I got there the morning at 9 a.m. and we waited. He finally showed up at 4 o'clock. He came in, gracious to all of us. He said, "Danny, I got to be honest with you. I've never been in the house, so I don't have any memories of being in the house because I don't think I was ever in the house. My scene was on the fence in front of the house. My scene was on the lawn on the side of the house and in the back of the house. So I don't know if he knew what to expect, but he walked in. He was like, oh, shit, And then, we just kind of watched him and did his thing. I knew he was excited and was feeling it once he pulled out his cell phone and started to take photos of it, that he was like, oh, shit. I think I'm pretty sure it exceeded his expectations. And I've done my best to pack that thing chock full of just everything you could imagine that with The Outsiders from day one till now. There's a lot to chew on in there. And by the time we got him out of the house and into the gift store behind it, and then he realized that his leather jacket was back there, he was super excited and he left with the big ass gift bag. So that's also good too, because some people don't want, they're like, it was cool, but I don't need anything, which I understand. I don't take stuff from people if I'm not going to wear it, whatever. But he was like, he had the beanies on, and giving T-shirts. You get one from his cousin, get one from his older brother, whatever. Made me feel good that he didn't leave empty-handed. And then, I had a photographer there, and I told him, listen, this guy's sitting in his car, but I'll send him home if you feel uncomfortable or this is not cool. He said, if he's good enough for you, he's good enough for me. And so I brought my buddy. He documented it all, and then I was able to tell the news when he left. He didn't say anything about the news, so I didn't want to have them waiting in the bushes either. But they got good photos from us, and it was fantastic that he came back and that he enjoyed it. That being said, will he be back next week? No. Will he be back in 3 weeks? We don't know. If we can get him to come back for an event, I'd love to do something where we could watch the movie. He can do a Q&A with me, and we could, raise money and pay him a nice little chunk of change and make a little money for the museum. All in due time, we'll know. But at the end of the day, the museum, even if nobody ever showed up celebrity-wise, it's a sight to behold. That being said, almost every week we get a celebrity like, between Leonardo DiCaprio, the Green Day, all the other cast from Killing on the Flower Moons. I've had every band under the sun that come through Tulsa just about. Today I was supposed to meet the Dropkicks, but he had to run to the studio quicker. I had Al Barr from the Dropkick Murphys. The last time they were on tour, he wore the shirt on a live event that they did during COVID at a boxing match, singing their song. It's everybody in our age group, they grew up loving this. And then I guess I can end with this. When I made this thing, I had no real plan of what it was going to be or how it was going to get done. But I thought I was building a museum for people like me and you, some aging greasers who had an affinity for tough guys, leather jackets, and switchblades. What ended up happening is I built a family museum, and the driving force behind it is usually the 7th grade students that have just finished reading the book or about to read the book, just like their older brother and sister did, just like their parents did. And a lot of them, if they're local, they remember when Coppola came here and they filmed both The Outsiders, then Rumblefish. It's a very important part of their shared collective memory and history. But we get people from all over the U.S., mainly the surrounding states. They come from Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Kansas, Missouri. I'm like, you just drove 14 hours? They're like, hell yeah, we did. I said, just to see the museum, or you come for another? No, just to see the museum. And so the fan base every year is producing a new crop of fans because the book is required reading globally. It's not even a local thing. It's there's copies. That book has been printed in over 33 languages, man. So this book is incredible. It's important to Tulsa. It's important to Tulsa's history, but it's important to the it's the first time that book is we can argue, and there's no real answer. What first rapper started hip hop? Like what's the first record that started that? Or let's do rock. What's the first rock record? You're going to say a blues record, or maybe this one. There's no true answer. If I ask you, what is the number one category in book sales to date? It's young adult literature. Who's the first person to start young adult literature? I got the answer. It's S.E. Hinton with The Outsiders. It's the first time in literary history that a 15-and-a-half-year-old, a teen, wrote about being a teen for teens. Prior to that, every book about being a teen was written from people our age, reflecting back on that era. She wrote it in that era, about that era, for her era. And that creates the young adult book category. It's not some little poo-butt category. It is the number one category in book sales of all time. And we know where that started, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, from a student named Susan Eloise Hinton, who they asked her to change her name to something more ambiguous that guys didn't know it was a girl writing it, because we wouldn't have read it probably at 15 had we known. And there's just so many little things to chew on with this thing, but I never get tired of telling it. It never gets old to me. The fact that Coppola was involved, the fact that the librarian who had 100 of her students write to Coppola in 81 or 82, insisting that he looks at this and turns it into a movie, which he did just that. There's just so much. The stars that got launched out of this, the careers that came out of this with the Brat Pack, from Swayze to Dylan to Macchio to Cruz, the smallest part becomes the biggest actor on the planet. There's just so much to love. And that little girl, 15-and-a-half years old, was the impetus for all of this by writing her book. And it's a time-honored classic. And to be a speckle of dust in this whole legacy is something I can't overstate to you how important it is to me. And this is why I'm on my best behavior. It's another reason. It's just to stay right-sized and stay accountable, because I'm one altercation on the streets from ruining, there's things that I can do. The old Danny can show up if I'm having a bad day and I'm frustrated, or I haven't eaten and or my sugar level drops, who knows? And so it's another thing that's, man, it's super precious to me. And I hope to never do anything to disgrace the author, the legacy, anything. And I do my best to just, everything is above board, everything is transparent, and everything is from the heart, man. I don't even have to think about it. I just do and say my story, my truth, how this all happened and how important it is, and everything else is in God's hands. So,
well, I mean, I can hear the passion. It's incredible. And then, like you said, the inception of the story, and even the lens that she had as a 15-year-old girl, right, in, what some would argue more of a masculine perspective story.
Oh, absolutely.
It's amazing. And then, absolutely. I mean, you look at all the faces on the original cast, oh my God, like all of them.
Emilio Estevez, Diane Lane, Leif Garrett. He was actually the biggest star at the time, because he was from the 70s, where he was a rollover from that era. So I was like, wait a minute, I already know who that guy is, but I didn't really know. I didn't have too much frame of reference for the rest of them until I did,
Yeah, incredible. Well, before I get to a couple of closing questions, for people listening, where's the best place to find out about the museum, where they can donate, and then what about social media handles as well?
Yeah, I mean, just The Outsiders House. Any Google search will bring up all of the links. TheOutsidersHouse.com, The Outsiders House Facebook, The Outsiders House Museum, Twitter. It's all easily searched. We can always use donations. We run the back as a for-profit, which is the merchandise and the tours, and then we have a nonprofit that supplements school children. A lot of these schools can't afford the bus, or can't afford the tickets, or can't afford the stuff. So we raise money on the nonprofit side. So if you donate, it goes to the nonprofit. It does not go to the profit side. And then we use it to subsidize schools and make it more affordable for them to come here. If not, we comp the whole thing depending on how much we have. COVID kind of knocked that on the head for a while because I didn't feel during the pandemic to go out asking for money for this. It's a luxury thing for even schools to come see it. But so far, so good. We have a lot of schools coming through, and it's miraculous to see. For me, I can't imagine. I wish I would have read it in 7th grade. I did not read it in 7th grade, but I wish I could have read it and enjoyed it then to go see the movie, then to be able to take a field trip to the actual house that is not only a collectible itself and in the movie, but the same collectible is the home of all the other great collectibles that are inside that house. And that's a Willy Wonka experience as far as I'm concerned. And I'm glad that we can offer it to the kids at Tulsa. And we had a tour 2 days ago come from 3 hours away in a place in Oklahoma I never heard. So I wouldn't even try to remember what she told me. I said, you guys drove how long? 3 hours. I said, unreal. I was so happy. Like they come all that way. That's a long way with the bus full of students, 8th graders these were. I thought my old ass was already like, well, how many bathroom stops is that for, like anyway, but the kids enjoy it. Even if they don't know the first thing about the book or the movie, which they all do, but there are some, their interest gets piqued in that there's all this cool greaser stuff from what they think is, eons ago, but it's got that 50s and 60s vibe of Anywhere USA. And so there's always something for somebody to chew on in there. So
brilliant. Well, I just want to ask 2 closing questions. The first one, because I normally ask about books and films. I think we've pretty much, filled those 2 slots, The Outsiders. So is there a person you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
I mean, maybe Ken Casey from Dropkick Murphys. I know he's at long-term sobriety. I know that, and this is from an outsider's perspective, all pun intended. I know that the Dropkicks didn't just have a meteoric rise to fame. They started middle class, working class, punk rock, and then with the release of Shipping Up to Boston and Gangs of New York, they go through the roof, and they've been able to stay up there, which is fantastic. If there's any competition at the stadiums for airtime on songs that get the crowd hyped, it's definitely the Dropkicks or Jack White's songs that are, in close running with Jump Around and We Will Rock You from Freddie Mercury. Anyway, he because he's here now, and because I think he'd be a great guest and he ran a pub for a long time. They owned Enough Said McGreedy's, which was like one of the oldest Boston Red Sox pub in Boston, 90 feet from Fenway. He's also got his hand in the boxing game. So and I think he runs a rehab or a fund that raises money. I think they do the Clotta Fund, which raises money for disadvantaged kids and sobriety and for other stuff. So he definitely is on my mind for a reason. And I think he'd be a great one. I will see him at some point later today. I'll mention it to him, but I think also ask Nako, because Nako is plugged in with them as well, way more than I am, I think he'd be great for you. And then what was the other question?
Well, actually, just to add to that, I had one of the band, Lee Forshner, who's kind of like their other bagpipe player. So when they tour, Lee is normally with them. He was a firefighter here in Florida and ended up being part of the band. So I think he's mentioned Ken as well. So that's someone I definitely need to reach out to.
And then I know that the original singer, Mike McColgan, he was on the fire department for a minute there too. And then he started the Street Dogs. So, but I think Ken would be a good one, man, because I mean, that's Ken's band. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, that's not a secret. That's his baby. He's the tip of the spear. And I think, and I never really, I don't know. I'm sure he's been on a lot of them, but I've never heard Ken really speak. He's actually speaking this Sunday at a meeting that we do here. He's going to be the speaker. I asked him yesterday. He's like, yeah, absolutely. Didn't even hesitate. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about the behind the scenes story of him. But just coming off the top of my head, I think that would be a great one for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that as I was talking to Noko is how we got connected. My thing is as this kind of nucleus of this project with people being military and first responder and medical and, like I saw boy soldiers and all these crazy things, the humanity is what connects us all. And one thing that's when I look back retroactively at the music scene, is I would say that and the acting profession. When we lose people to addiction or suicide, there used to be for a very long time, well, it's what you get. Being a musician, being a rock, you know what I mean? And that's absolute bullshit. So, I'm really wanting to get some people from, that kind of background in industry as well, because we're all human beings. I wore a uniform as a firefighter. You were, behind the guys holding the microphones. You were kind of creating that entire stage for them. So we've all got different professions, but ultimately we're humans. We began as children and had our experience, whatever that was. And then that, kind of catapulted us to positive, negative, and everything in between. So yeah, I would love to get that and, and bring that commonality in from the kind of, pseudo punk rock scene as well.
Yeah, man.
Brilliant. All right. Well, the very last question I heard you talk about, we'll touch on meditation for a second. So the very last one before I let you go, what do you do to decompress?
I mean, there's a few different methods. I mean, in the morning, I'm not perfect with it, but I definitely pray, meditate, and write a gratitude list. And then during the day, there's a thing called HALT. It's an acronym. And anytime I'm stressed out, I got to go, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Sometimes it's all four. It could be horny too. I'm just kidding. But when I ask myself those questions, I go, holy shit, I haven't eaten anything. I've taken 6 shots of espresso and ate a donut. And now my sugar's crashing and I'm angry and irritable and discontent. And I'm like, shocker, you might want to like take a nap or eat something, go get something that'll replenish your. And so those are the things that I do. And then one from the program is pause when agitated. It's like you try to not make any decisions in haste. Because as soon as I get upset, the snap decisions are the ones that have cost me the most. It's good to pause and just be like, dude, hold up. All right, let me think about this for a second and let me cool down. Isn't that right, little bit? But yeah, that's it. I got my little adopted dog here. I thought I was going to foster him for 1 week and then I'd find someone who could take him. But now we're stuck on each other like glue. It's a good, listen, life is good, man. When I just got out of my own way and then just started to participate in a way that was, different than I had been doing before. Like I said about parenting, and I haven't ever experienced that, but I had a good blueprint from just doing the opposite, I think, of, that 70s model that was going around in New York for a long time that I saw in my life. Yeah, I think from the life that I formerly led, I just do the absolute opposite. There's a St. Francis prayer, and you'll have to Google it because I don't want to botch it, but it's basically bringing what's missing. If there's despair, bring hope. If there's anger, bring love. If there's, it's basically bringing an opposite action to what you don't like. And so it's easy for me to find fault in things. So what can I bring to counterbalance? That is what I try to do the most. Not always easy. And so with that, I'll end. I got to go walk this dog and take care of the rest of my day. But it's been a pleasure talking to you. Shout out to Naco Nolan. He's one of the most even-keeled, man's man, always there to help. I can't say enough good things about him. And he's a big influence on me too, man, because we both started out big cheeseburger eating, shit talking New Yorkers. And in the last, it's been 8 years since I've known him, probably, maybe more. I've watched the growth in him in ways that we both never wore shorts. I'm wearing shorts right now. He's wearing shorts. We used to clown on dudes with flip-flops. He's rocking flip-flops. He's doing jiu-jitsu. He even bought a fucking surfboard, for Christ's sakes. I mean, that's far from who we were like, jaded New Yorkers talking shit, and it's just so great to watch people do what they say they're going to do and grow, because I notice it before they might notice the growth in themselves. And that's the same thing for me. People tell me, Danny, it's so impressive to see what you're doing. I don't even notice because I'm just doing what I'm doing. And, it's like that. So shout out to Naco Nolan. Great talking to you, my man. I will put it in Ken's ear today, but also tell Knock, because he's got a direct connect with them. And I'm looking forward to, one day coming and meeting you and all hanging out. Maybe me, you, and Knock can get together and chop it up some more.